Okay, here we are. And which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones right now, Donald Trump.
Right now, a historic moment. We can now project the winner of the presidential race. CNN projects Donald Trump wins the presidency. The business tycoon and TV personality capping his improbable political journey with an astounding upset victory. Donald J. Trump will become the 45th president of the United States, defeating Hillary Clinton.
And how is it any of your business what I choose to put in my body if I'm not affecting anyone else?
Okay, first of all, for alleged individualists, you're very mob-like. Second of all, it is my business. It is my business.
But the question is, why is it your business?
When we are living in a welfare state. You get rid of the welfare state, and then we'll talk about drug legalization. But right now, I have to pay for, it turns out, coming down the pike, your health care. I have to pay your unemployment when you can't hold a job. I have to pay for your food, for your housing.
But if someone's not using any of those programs in a hypothetical world or whatever, then would you be okay with it?
Would you say all the drugs should be legal if we didn't have a socialist health care system?
I wouldn't care.
And basically, United States economy, it's because of Latin people.
Okay, so...
Okay, the answer. Now I'm talking. No, that's
I can continue.
That's preposterous. It's not about race. It's about culture and poverty and
Culture
collecting.
is
Again, I was talking, man.
Of races.
I'm just going to say you got to read my book. This is very clearly dealt with, and the answer is you're not black. So drop the racism crap. A successful nation, and the Democrats do it for the votes. The rich do it for the cheap labor and the cheap maids. They strut around like they're Martin Luther King. No, who is our immigration policy hurting? And this is the post-1965 immigration. We're bringing in millions and millions of people from very poor cultures, from very backwards cultures. No, our social programs are for the American poor. They are for
let me just point out to you that you're
for the
sitting at this
American
table
working
next
class.
to two immigrants, and I don't think either of us qualify as poor maids. But I wanted to ask you, what's your family's immigration story? Are you a Native American?
Why, yes, I am. I'm a settler. I'm descended from settlers, not from immigrants.
Well, it's not a Native American. But I have a question for you.
It's just an
No, if you mean Indian,
if you mean
culture.
Well, no, but I'm not living in Cherokee Nation, so I am not an immigrant to Cherokee Nation. I'm living in America, which was created by settlers, not immigrants.
I have a question.
But
can I interrupt you for 2 seconds, please?
Yes, the poorest
I have a question. My mom taught me when I was younger, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And why do you think that it's important? Why do you think that's important to mudsling and have these words that obviously touch the hearts and souls of so many people of America being said when we're taught something different as a child? Could you explain that to me? And why do you think your success is based off of that?
Well, I'm at least talking about policy. You have a position on what people's names should be. Watermelondria. I mean, you'll insult people for their names. I'm talking about a government policy that affects all Americans and immigrants and the people living here, and it's harming our country.
So are you?
So you don't follow it.
Are you
I didn't ask
against?
you okay.
Please welcome controversial columnist and best-selling author Ann Coulter. And Ann, I really want to welcome you, but I don't get this about the single mothers. They should give up their kids for adoption.
Oh, definitely. That's what the statistics are. I mean, not once they're 14, but a woman who gets pregnant out of wedlock, if she wants to do the best thing for the child, it is overwhelming. She should give the child up for adoption because the statistics, both from the left and the right, are overwhelming on what happens to illegitimate children. If you look at it from the end of the spectrum of who ends up in jail, who ends up a murderer, who ends up a teenage runaway, who ends up getting pregnant out of wedlock herself, who ends up a rapist, about 70%, according to both the Village Voice and all these conservative pro-family groups, are going to be the children of single mothers. I mean, that is simply a fact. Now, imagine an America with 70% fewer teenage runaways, fewer teenage murders, fewer teenage drug addicts, fewer teenage pregnancies. That's what single mothers have created. Single mother specifically refers to a woman who, A, gets pregnant out of wedlock, and B, decides for narcissistic reasons, I'm going to keep this child for myself, because if she cares what's best for the child, she will give the child up for adoption, and that is a fact.
No, and we have more from the audience.
You keep saying, you know, statistics, but anybody can make up a statistic.
That's why there's so many of them, from both the left and from the right, and for 30 years
Where do you
now.
think it's okay to say all this?
Okay, I mean, you know what? You may as well stand up.
My mother was a single mom, and I'm getting, like, emotional.
That's fine. You're saying what you feel.
I can't talk now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you may as well stand up and say, I'm a smoker and I'm very upset about the smoking statistics, and don't you tell me about lung cancer.
Je probeert dan terug je toekomst.
OJ, I mean, I think that was the moment, having lived near New York City in the 70s and 80s, which was the golden era. It was like Trayvon Martin and Duke lacrosse case every day. With the OJ verdict, white America said, that's it, the white guilt bank is shut down, and that ended up being the best thing that ever happened to black Americans. I meant that no longer...
Being acquitted was good for who?
Yes, because you had millions of white people watching with the equivalent of what in New York we used to refer to as the Brooklyn juries, who simply would not convict even guilty black criminals.
Outlandish remarks, but tonight, American right-wing pundit Ann Coulter left a sour taste in some people's mouths. She spoke tonight at the University of Western Ontario, where one student stormed out. Anna Vlachos joins us live to explain why. Anna.
Tara, during a question and answer period, Fatima Al-Dahar says Coulter's response to her was extremely offensive.
You also said that we should get all the Muslims to boycott all airlines. When asked what the alternative modes of transportation were, you suggested flying carpet. Question. First of all, as a 17-year-old student of this university, Muslim, should I be converted to Christianity? Second of all, since I don't have a magic carpet, what other modes do you suggest? Answer the question!
What mode of transportation? Take a camel!
I got up and left because it was absolutely ridiculous. She's talking about political correctness, and right there she blatantly she stabbed me in the heart. That was rude. Use your camel? I mean, come on.
Got him! Got him!
So do you want in the late 1800s and in the early 1900s there were signs, Nina signs, that said no Irish need apply.
No, that's nonsense.
So you want us to go back to those days?
No, well, A, that isn't true. I don't know what that has to do with anything. But the point is, before Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act, there was more diversity in immigration. Diversity should mean we take an equal number from, all the countries in the world. I think that would be a stupid policy, but that would at least be diversity. Still talking. That's not what we're doing now. We are taking 30% of all legal immigrants from Mexico, 60% of all illegal immigrants from Mexico. Instead of taking 5% or more from 7 different countries, which was the case before 1965,
mostly European countries that you
we're
want.
taking them all from Mexico. Well, okay, but
so your problem is with Mexicans, but not with Europeans.
No, you said what's the matter with diversity. I'm telling you it's not diversity. I'm just getting our facts straight. And no, I didn't want to live in Mexico.
Facts. So
I don't want to live in Ireland. I don't want to live in Scotland. I wanted to live in America. Why don't liberals? Why do you think that the Mexicans who fled here want to recreate Mexico here? No, it helps your power because your media desirability goes up a lot. But you're not speaking for the immigrants who came here from Mexico. They left Mexico. They came
and
to
it's an economic situation. It's simply an economic situation.
Things in Afghanistan are going horribly, but this is interesting. Osama bin Laden is irrelevant. The person, the mastermind behind the Al-Qaeda attacks on the United States is completely irrelevant. Is that what you're saying?
Right. It was handed to Bill Clinton twice.
Oh, it's Bill Clinton's fault.
Said no.
Yeah, because I think that actually George Bush was president in 2001.
I know you're trying to imitate Alan Combs, but at some point he does let me answer.
Most immigrants are not terrorists, nor criminals.
I have a little tip.
No one is biologically predisposed
if you
to
don't
commit
want
a
to be
crime.
killed by ISIS, don't go to Syria. If you don't want to be killed by a Mexican, there's nothing I can tell you.
Over for very different reasons than they did at the turn of the century.
Well, it's more than them just coming. Our rules are set up to make it virtually impossible for people to come in and compete, for example, with Mark Zuckerberg for his job. They will be competing for Mark Zuckerberg's landscaper's job. We're not getting...
But there are people who say that's not the worst thing, because if you've got a landscaper...
Well, the landscapers think so.
Well, not necessarily. You're working in a low-wage, low-skilled job for a short amount of time, creating capital. You know, you are, A, adding to the economy, economy and be bettering your life so you can go on to do
No, you're not
other
adding
things.
to the economy. You are
yes,
adding
you are.
to the income.
Immigrants are the grease of the wheel in the economy.
Well, that's just cliche, but
it's not.
It doesn't mean anything.
Study after study
Okay, we'll discuss how this works. If you have low-wage immigrants coming in, taking more from the government than they're paying in, that isn't helping the economy. What it's helping is the employer. It may help the low-wage immigrant. It's definitely hurting the people who would be competing for that job, including recent immigrants.
Okay, so if you say
and
that immigrants...
it's definitely hurting people who pay taxes, which unfortunately is only half the country. Now, the employer...
I'm just kind of annoyed with the fact that you are just perpetuating the stereotype that all libertarians are quote-unquote stoners. I have never smoked pot before.
I don't think you are
I never want to. I never want to try, in all honesty. The drugs that are illegal, I don't want to try any of them.
I don't think any of you are stoners. You're nerds. He asked me about pot legalization.
My question is, how is it...
yourself off of television till you come back and start your new book. Can you give us a clue what the new book is?
Alan's in it.
Is that good? Anything for books?
Am I in it?
Oh, no.
Yes, you are.
Anything for books.
I'm not worried about me. What do you say about Alan? What's the book about? Give us.
Well, the title of it is Guilty: Liberal Victims and Their Assault on America.
I hope you use my middle name.
Is it Hussein? No, it's Stalin.
It's what?
Oh, she said Stalin.
I'm not even going there. You're on your own. You're on your own.
Was formed by immigrants, including your family and my family. We all came from another country. We all came from another country.
I didn't come from another country.
Well, your family did.
No, it didn't.
Of course it did.
No, it didn't.
Of course it did.
There was no, it did not. My family came from America because there was no America until they came.
Okay, before your parents, they came from somewhere.
If they taught American history,
That's the one thing.
Apparently they don't. The first people here back in the 1600s were not immigrants. They were settlers. They came to a society or a continent
they came from another
had
country.
no country. They created this country. The Dutch, mostly the British, created America.
So they
were not immigrants.
So
nor were the first 17 presidents.
your family came from
immigrants.
another
They were
country,
settlers.
so did mine.
No, they weren't. My relatives are American.
All right. Let's take a break.
You are a cultural imperialist.
Before the students get to ask questions, gay marriage. Why can't gays get married like straights do?
Well, they can. They have to marry a member of the opposite sex.
Okay. Ann Coulter, how could Obama be any stronger on foreign policy short of attacking Iran? And I remember you said after 9/11, what we should do is attack Muslim countries, kill their leaders, and convert them to Christianity.
Yes.
Do you still stand by that moderate position?
Fantastic policy. I haven't heard of it. Skip that for a second and get to the Southern strategy. Yeah. Because I've specifically disproved it. It's an absolutely liberal folklore. Republicans were winning the South since 1920. It was the outer states of the South. It was Texas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia.
Voting. What are you talking about? We weren't allowed
who
to
was
vote.
trying to get them to vote? Republicans were.
Yeah,
and the first black congressmen were all Republicans. And the first black governor was a Republican.
You're talking about way back.
After is so different from
No, that is definitely what we're told. But in fact, the Democratic segregationists were all liberal Democrats. It is a lie that they were conservative Democrats.
It was a segregationist, darling. And you know, basically, everybody was. White people were. It didn't matter whether they were Republicans or not.
Look, the pre-1970 immigrants were more educated, made more money, were more likely to buy houses, and 30% of them went home. Now no one goes home. They go on welfare, and they are far more likely to be on welfare than the native population. I think a nation's policies should be concerned with the people already here, and that includes the immigrants who came last year and the year before. It should be people who live here benefit, not to become the, battered woman's shelter of the world, where we're bringing in the hardest cases and, the wife beaters and the single mother with 8 kids.
Again,
you can't take positions that most Americans, it's Donald Trump and the American people against the political class and the donor class. The same thing with his tax plan. And I love him for immigration.
But the donor class is the Koch brothers, let's say, for example. Are they going to put their money behind Trump?
Probably not, but who cares? The people are for him. That's what we're finding out right now. Look at all of the money Jeb Bush had. And by the way, both parties with that 12% rate on hedge fund managers. Hillary Clinton was on the finance committee. I'm sorry, that is unfair. And it takes Donald Trump saying no hedge fund manager should pay the same as Ann Coulter does. It takes him saying that because the donors have been stepping in saying, no, 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 we like paying less than everyone else. Okay,
do you think he can
you're
win?
You're paying a higher tax rate than hedge fund managers.
I kind of have a problem with the way that you're talking about gay marriage and the way the libertarians here are kind of talking about gay marriage, because I've kind of always seen the libertarian position on gay marriage as kind of a third way. We don't say what the liberals say, which is that, you know, the government should define it one way or the other. We say that the government should not be involved in marriage at all.
Well, again, we're way past that point. I think it would be very hard to achieve in any event, but the government issues divorce decrees, it issues alimony orders, it issues child support, child custody. We're beyond the point of saying, I just think government shouldn't be involved. They are involved.
Let's say everything you say is true, which it isn't.
Well, let's say it isn't. That's not, okay, your snotty little mark aside, it's irrelevant. The point at issue is, should America's immigration policy be used to benefit the people already here, or should it be benefiting Pakistani pushcart operators, illiterate in their own language, never mind ours, who come here, go on welfare, commit terrorism, engage in crimes?
All right,
why wouldn't you look out across the world like a sports team does and try to get the creme de la creme? Not like this audience. We don't want these people. We want the creme de la creme.
Police officers who arrested criminals, their names are in the paper. Then you have, they know the people who have guns if they want to steal them, people who don't have guns where they can go rape, rob, and steal. This is really dangerous.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it's a wake-up call for New York State. This is to make these public records has got to be changed. Many states already do that. You get a gun permit. That is not a public record for exactly the reason you say. Criminals know whose house they can home invade when people are there. This is why home invasions are 10 times higher in Britain than they are in this country, because there's no private gun ownership. And that's a curious thing. I mean, why, as that man just said, why aren't we getting names of recently paroled criminals? People with gun permits, by definition, do not have criminal records. Why can't we get the criminal records? No, we can't get that. Why can't we get a record of women who have had abortions? They get money from Planned Parenthood. They get money from Medicare, from Medicaid. Much of this is their tax subsidies. I think, you know, mothers might want to know what other women on their street might be willing to murder a child. How about the list of rent-controlled apartments in New York? And by the way, if we're producing lists even of gun permit owners, I want them for Manhattan. I want to know how many rich liberals with their bodyguards have gun permits. The News Journal or Journal News by
about Matt Barnes of the Los Angeles Clippers in that story. He accepted our invitation to come on the show tonight and talk about what is admittedly a controversial topic. He canceled today, but here with me now, shall we say the incomparable Miss Ann Coulter. Her new book is Never Trust a Liberal Over Three, Especially a Republican. Also CNN political commentator Mark Lamont Hill. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Sure. I'll be here.
We're using the N-word really to spark a larger conversation about personal and professional consequences of saying the N-word. We've seen a lot of people lose their careers. We've seen many people become stars because of it. Is it okay, Mark, to say this word dozens of times in movies or albums? Does that make it okay?
It depends on what you mean by okay. If you mean as, let's get this out of the way, as a First Amendment matter, I think we all probably agree, at least the three of us, that you have a right to say it. And I don't think anyone wants to remove anyone's legal right to say it. So those people can, we can end that part of the conversation. But do I think a person should use it? Well, it depends on context. I think context matters with language more than anything else. In a movie about slavery, it would seem sort of odd for someone not to use the N-word. I would feel odd if a slave master was saying, hey, good fellow, could you go pick up that bale or tote that barge? That would be very strange to me. In music, I think people have freedom of expression. I mean, you talked about Kanye West's song, Niggas in Paris, and for me, particularly based on Kanye's interviews over the last few weeks, we see that it wasn't just a gratuitous use of the N-word. He was talking about the experience of being treated a certain way in a certain kind of cultural space. I will say, finally, that the guy who did the voiceover for that, the white guy that did the voiceover that said niggas in Paris, made me very uncomfortable. So it's context-driven.
And does hearing it so much in pop culture blur the lines of what's acceptable to most people in daily life?
It may be, especially with the young, aspiring, white rap artists who want to be like Eminem. And I do think it makes a difference, obviously, if a white person or a black person says it. It's an ugly word. Unless you have Tourette syndrome, I don't think any white person should be saying it. I also think the N-word is different from many, many other words that everyone is always trying to compare to the N-word. As your segment at the beginning said, and I think it's correct, if the black experience is different from any other experience in America. There is slavery, there is Jim Crow, so I really do resent it when people come along and say, well, you can't say the phrase illegal alien when you use the N-word. You can't say retard when you say the N-word. You can't say, I don't know, a million other things. They're always comparing it to the N-word, so the main point I want to make is no other word is like the N-word.
Ann Coulter for the win, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody saw that coming.
CNN, people are going to say, Ann Coulter, this is one of the first times I've ever agreed with Ann Coulter, and it's on CNN. Mark this down in your calendar. But, Ann, you've always felt this way. This isn't new for you, right?
It's not only not new for me, this is standard Republican position. I mean, Justice Rehnquist.
And we're back.
Yeah, okay, hang on.
Now we're back to normal.
Yeah, there we go. There's the Ann Coulter we know, the one who wrote this book called Mugged, and the new one now. Never Trust
You're going to love it.
Okay.
Trust me, you're going to love it.
All right, stand by. We're going to talk much more about the N-word guys and a lot of other things. And we come right back. I want to talk about the words that have cost some people careers. Talking about words that cost some people their careers and made others into stars. So who decides what you can say? I'm back now with Ann Coulter and Mark Lamont Hill. Guys, Twitter is going crazy. People are saying, I can't deal with the that I just agreed with Ann Coulter. And you got them talking, especially about that.
Well, you tell them this is a Republican position. As I was saying, sorry, I didn't know we were cutting to a commercial break. This was always Justice Rehnquist's position on the Supreme Court with civil rights laws. Civil rights laws are for blacks. They were written after the Civil War. That is why we have the 14th and the 15th Amendment. It's not for smelly homeless people in public libraries. It's not for a lesbian who wants to take her date to the senior prom. It's not for feminists. It's not for illegal aliens. This is what civil rights is about, and I'm just stating the standard Republican position.
I saw Mark smile there when she said illegal aliens. Mark said, okay, there's the Ann Coulter we know. Listen, I want to warn everybody at home, though, that we're about to play a clip that is powerful and is controversial, but it makes an important point. It's one thing when adults use words like the N-word, but I want you to listen to this. The same words coming from the mouths of children. An agency in L.A. put this video together.
One call, niggas aim that tech. Headshot, nigga brains on step.
Okay, so that was mild. Most of this video we can't show you because kids use way more words than the N-word, derogatory things about women, women's body parts.
But that's a different set of issues.
Go ahead, Mark.
That's a different set of issues. I mean, the video you just showed some black and brown kids being looked upon in very negative light with the use of the gun, the violent imagery.
There were white kids too.
Yeah. Oh, it's a black and white video. It's hard for me to see, but all those kids are being constructed in a very negative light. And I don't think to attach the N-word to that, of course, will make it problematic. But there's also context in which the N-word is used internally among black people in ways that don't reflect that sensibility.
Yeah, but the point of the video, Mark, is to show the effect that it has on children, and many of them black children. Go ahead.
But that's my point. That doesn't have the effect on it. Young kids are not going wayward because the N-word exists in the lexicon. People don't use the body language and image of a gun because of the N-word. They use it because of access to guns. People don't commit crimes because of that. They commit them because there's a lack of jobs. There's mass incarceration. I could list a range of things that lead to social decay, and none of them have to do with linguistics. And so that, for me, is deeply problematic. We can't keep becoming so religious about the N-word and think that if we can remove it from our public conversation, we can eliminate public problems.
Again, listen, the clip that we could play was the N-word. We couldn't play the kids saying the F-bomb or the P word for women's body parts. We couldn't play that. So, listen, this isn't just about the N-word, just about guns. It's talking about words that are used in popular culture and the effect that it has on children. Anne?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Mark said at the beginning. We're obviously not talking about the government regulating anything. And, yeah, fine, there's artistic freedom. But as a personal preference, yeah, I think it's way oversaid in popular culture. And it's one thing when it's, you know, when it's hip-hop music and it's telling a parable, the same way, you know, country music songs talk about being unemployed and leaving your wife and everything else. It's not like you think the person singing really is doing these things. It's playing a character. So I don't really object to that, but, you know, maybe don't play it for your kids. I will disagree with everything Mark said about it being a problem of joblessness. It is a problem of single motherhood. You know perfectly well, Mark Lamont Hill.
Well, one big contributor to single motherhood is mass incarceration, which was another issue that I mentioned. My point here, oh, absolutely, that's just an empirical fact.
You're getting the chicken and the egg confused.
No, I got it right. But the point here, the point here is that there are a range of social issues that we could be invested in, but instead we've decided to invest it in the N-word. But let me just say this, that I think part of the reason is because I think it's one of the few things in public space that white people don't have unmitigated access to or unobstructed access to. And so people freak out about the N-word because they can't say it. I think that's a big problem here.
Yeah, but you said one thing that contributes to single parent is mass incarceration. Okay, yeah, that's one thing, but the biggest thing is people having unprotected sex. That's the biggest thing that contributes to, so you can't, you know, just...
Unprotected sex leads to single parenthood?
Well, if you're having sex and you're single...
Who's your biology teacher?
How do you have a kid? I mean, come on, let's be honest about that. Let's move on, Yeah,
because that's a really problematic way to think about that.
That is not a problematic way. The way you have kids is through sex. If you're in prison, chances are you're not having kids.
Don, but you're constructing a narrative that suggests that people should marry their way out of poverty.
No, I'm saying that you're saying that the biggest contributor is that it's not. I will admit to you it is one contributing factor, but it is not the biggest and only contributing factor. And you can't talk about one without talking about the other.
And I'm saying single parenthood is not the issue. When you say single parenthood, you're talking about not being married. Don.
Okay, all right. So
and that's just not true.
Let's move on. Listen, we're talking about the word police here, right? We're not the word police, but listen, I want to say we're just sticking with the N word, but there are more words. The F word, and we're talking about fag. Why don't we just say it? Ann Coulter, you got in trouble, remember, a while ago saying that word, yet you defended Alec Baldwin when he said that word. Should that word be allowed to be used? Do you have the same stance on that as you do the N-word?
No. I definitely separate them. And ironically, my use of it illustrates exactly the point I was making, that blacks are being too generous with their experience in America. Yeah. Not everyone has that experience. That was a joke on a black actor, Isaiah Washington, who had called a fellow actor a faggot. And it became this huge continuing issue. There were like constant NASDAQ updates. Did he say it? Didn't he say it? Finally, he admitted he said it, and he was going into rehab for saying a word.
Didn't you say it about John Edwards?
And that's why I said, right in the middle of this whole thing, where he's going into rehab, again, for a word he used, which is madness. I said, and I had a few words to say about John Edwards, but apparently you can't use that word without going to rehab. Okay. That was the joke.
But that's the problem.
Quickly, Mark, quickly.
But think of this, my point on that is, this is a black man who does have the authentic suffering legacy that I think deserves some special treatment, and he's the one getting in trouble for saying a word.
Yeah, and
Mark Lamont Hill. Mark, continue your thought, but I think you're probably going to go into the vein of, you know, a lot of people have been demonized, lost their careers about saying certain words. Do we really have a true freedom of speech in this country?
I mean, the question is, you do have freedom of speech, but freedom of speech comes with consequences. Again, you know, Paula Deen lost her empire, part of her empire, partly because sponsors didn't want to stand next to somebody who did that. Back in the day when Don Imus used the phrase nappy-headed hose, he lost his job largely because people went to the sponsors and said, we don't want to buy products from companies that advertise on this thing. So people always want the free market to decide. Republicans always want the free market to decide. Well, the free market decided. And when it comes to the F word for gay people, when it comes to inappropriate words for other people, I say, yeah, it doesn't have to have the exact same history as the N-word for me not to use it. As a straight person, I don't use derogatory terms against gay people because they've also had a history of oppression. They've also been denied access to marriage, which is why I'm stunned that you're vying for marriage to be this golden ideal here. I mean,
no, that's not what I'm saying. And listen, don't get it twisted. I said one of the reasons. It's not the only reason. You made it sound like we were talking about prison, that it was the only reason for single mothers. That's not it. I'm saying that's one of the reasons. And another reason is because of having unprotected sex. You cannot have kids without having sex. Usually,
that is an astute observation.
Yes. So I mean,
but the point is still wrong. But the point is still wrong.
Hey, let's get back to words.
Ann, go ahead real quick. I'm sorry, we're almost at the end of the show.
Yes, you're getting totally lost in single motherhood.
I'm sorry.
Look, the point with words like fags and retard is you wouldn't use those words to if you were referring to an actual homosexual or to an actual retarded person. And also, I think all these words, and for every one of your examples, I can find someone who has used it and did not lose a career over it. So it's always just a power play.
Yeah, and you said the market decided. The market really didn't decide on Paula Deen. It was really the heads of companies that took her up, because people were still buying her products, and they said they were going to watch her show. Her book was #1, so I'm not sure the market decided with that.
The companies didn't want to look bad. Yeah. That's money driven. You think companies did it out of feeling?
Thank you, guys. To be continued. Appreciate it. Ann Coulter, Mark Lamont Hill.
Are footing the bill for terrorism. Now, meanwhile, the older brother's radicalization and his associations are now raising questions about what we as a country can do to prevent these types of individuals from entering the United States in the first place. Now, should this impact our current immigration policy? Now, earlier I sat down with Ann Coulter to get her take on this pressing issue. All right, joining us now, the ever shy Ann Coulter. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right. All right. Now, we have the Boston bombing. We learned a lot of things that our law enforcement screwed up.
Yeah.
Our Department of Homeland Security, CIA was warning about this guy, FBI was warning about this guy, the Russians were warning about this guy.
Yeah.
How does this connect to the immigration debate? Because you were on the cover of Drudge last week, and the issue was immigration. It's not just about borders, it's also about visas.
Right. Well, as I've mentioned before, Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act was specifically designed to bring in mostly third world immigrants and to block immigrants from the countries that we've traditionally taken immigrants from, with a made-up America, i.e. Europe, heavily Europe, so I went through recent mass murders committed by immigrants who come here, can't make it in this country. They're angry at the country and lash out at Americans. There are about a dozen of them just in 2010, 2011, 2012, committed by immigrants who were not, doing the jobs Americans wouldn't do. They were here like Suspect 1 and Suspect 2, which, by the way, have become the popular way to identify them because no one can pronounce their names. They're here. The family's on welfare. The suspects are on welfare. And meanwhile, they're talking about how they hate America.
But the Saudi, this was a stunning statistic to me. Saudi Arabia literally had a 500% increase since 9/11/2001 in student visas.
Right.
All right, here's my question.
And let me add to that point, often the refugee status, the asylum status is based on these guys being considered, they're being persecuted by their home governments. Sometimes they're being persecuted for the reason. I think that's how the blind sheikh got in. The guy who shot up the Empire State Building, he gets in, or maybe it was at the El Al counter at LAX. They get in because they're members of the Muslim Brotherhood, and Egypt doesn't like or whichever country it was doesn't like the Muslim Brotherhood. Why are we bringing them in?
Yeah, no, we can be pretty stupid as a country. We have dumb politicians. Here's my question, though. If you grow up in Saudi Arabia, for example, let's see, you grow up in a society where women must be covered, where women cannot drive, women cannot be seen in public without a male that they are related to. They have the morality police walking around. You need 4 male eyewitnesses to prove rape.
Right.
And we know the issue of divorce and marriage and men.
Right.
And
that culture is coming here instead of them becoming assimilated in our culture.
But here's my question. But the point is, growing up there and then coming here, if you've been taught that that's the right way, then you're going to think that America's evil and open, and, well, look, women aren't covered, they're in bikinis.
Right.
I mean, shocking.
No, not only that cultural difference, but because our immigration policy does not discriminate in favor of people who are educated, who speak English, who have skills we need, we are bringing in, pushcart operators, or these guys up in Boston who had no visible skills. I mean, the one where the father talking about, he was going to be a great doctor. He was studying to be a nurse, and he was failing all of his courses. How is this an addition to America? And the important point, I think, you have recent immigrants, 85% are from the third world. More than 60% of them need government assistance. Now, you know, the amnesty advocates, like Rubio, will say, oh, but it's only 30% more than the native-born Americans. My point is 0 immigrants should be collecting government assistance. If you are collecting government assistance, it seems to me, can't we all agree you are not the kind of immigrant we need in America here? 0 immigrants should be committing mass murder.
If you grow up in a society that has Sharia law as its basis in law, you have been indoctrinated into a system that is totally, completely, and utterly contrary to our Constitution and our way of life.
Yes.
Are we making a mistake by just assuming, oh, everybody's inherent, natural, God-given desire to be free will transcend whatever cultural mores you were indoctrinated into?
You're absolutely right. And 2 points on that. We've completely given up trying to assimilate them. We do not have, you know, I mean, the worst place to send, I would say, anyone is to an American university. You could go into the University of Patriot, you're going to come out hating America, and this is supposed to be good for us. Bring them. They already hate America. The second point is, I mean, there is a reason, for example, the Constitution says that to be president, you have to have been born in the United States. And it isn't just Obama that started these conspiracy theories. Chester Arthur, his father was from Canada, and there was a big hoo-ha over, was he an American? Because there is an idea that they were, I think, the only 2 presidents whose fathers, whose parents were not both born in America. There is something to having been here, to having been native. We know we have our own native-born losers, murderers, welfare recipients. Fine, we'll deal with them. Why are we bringing them in?
Why are we importing more?
And on your point about how they're brought up in the culture and everything, when I was speaking at Syracuse last week, an angry third worlder, I think a Muslim, got up and asked a question and said...
Why do you say Muslim? What is Muslim?
Anyway, I'm trying to be sensitive to how they say it. Okay. And he said, oh, but you have to understand, I mean, with an accent, clearly an immigrant, you have to understand that the reason we hate America is because of things America's doing around the world. And he was very angry about it. And I said, look, fine, I understand that. My point is, you should not be immigrating here. Stay in your country and hate us.
Hate us over there. Yeah. I've never understood the American left and why they are not more outspoken, as conservatives are, for women's rights, that women that live under these oppressive regimes, that live under Sharia